with everything that is, right? It has to be compatible with everything that is. That reality simply has no extrinsic or intrinsic boundaries. You have to speak, well, in the via negativa, you kind of have to speak about it by naysaying. It's not got this boundary. It doesn't have any boundaries. It is an unbounded, unrestricted reality. But the minute you try and give it a positive picture, think image, you've lost it. You don't have the reality that we're talking about. We're talking about the unrestricted reality, which must be compatible with everything that is, which in turn must be an absolutely simple reality, which has absolutely no restriction. Now, that's what St. Thomas Aquinas means by infinity here. He means absolutely simple. He means the absence of boundary to act. He means the absence of restriction to act. So what we're literally dealing with here is a restriction, is an unrestricted reality in the sense of pure power, pure act, pure existence, pure being, pure acting power that has no intrinsic and no extrinsic restriction. It's not subject to space. It's not subject to time. It's not subject to way of acting. Whoa! I mean, it's just like power, acting power. Can you say anything more about this, Spitzer? Not positively. I really can't. All I can tell you is negatively, it doesn't have any boundary, because if it had a boundary, it excludes something, and it would exclude a possible reality from itself, in which case that possible reality would not be. This thing has to be inclusive of, compatible with, every single solitary thing which could ever come to be. Everything. No matter what boundary. Which means it's boundaryless. Now, there's just one other little fascinating aspect to this being. It's not just absolutely simple. And it's not just unrestricted or infinite in the sense of not having an intrinsic or extrinsic boundary, not subject to a spatial or temporal magnitude. It's absolutely unique. I mean to say, it is one and only one, and it can only be one. And there's a very simple reason for this. And St. Thomas Aquinas, by the way, he notices this right away in the De Ente et Essentia, right, on being in essence, a tractate he wrote as a very young man. But the key insight to this is that what Aquinas knows is, look, let's suppose you had two of these beings. Let's suppose for a moment you had two unconditioned realities, which we now know are two absolutely simple realities. That's a contradiction. You can't have two absolutely simple realities. Because what it means to be absolutely simple is to have nothing in it that could exclude at the same level of existence, namely at the top of the tree of being. Take a look at the top of the tree. Now let's suppose from the diagram that you see there, you're going Z, not Z, A, X, not X, and so forth. You get to the top of the tree of being, you're at an absolutely simple reality, and let's suppose for a moment we have instance of absolute simple reality number one and an instance of absolutely simple reality number two. How did you get two? The only way you can get two is with a difference between the first instance and the second instance. And the only way of getting a difference between the first instance and the second instance is either to put something into that second instance, which is not absolute simplicity, which can differentiate it from the first absolute simplicity, or to subject the second simplicity to some kind of a magnitude like space, which could keep it separated from the first level of simplicity. In other words, you would have to do something to the second absolute simplicity. You'd have to put something into it which was not absolute simplicity. Otherwise, that second absolute simplicity would be completely undifferentiatable from the first absolute simplicity. It would just be one absolute simplicity, one self-same simplicity. And what St. Thomas noticed then is, if you're going to differentiate between two absolutely simples, between two absolutely simple unconditioned realities, between two absolutely simple things which are compatible with everything that is and don't have any boundaries, the one thing you're going to have to do is find a differentiating factor. And we know one thing about that differentiating factor. That differentiating factor is not going to be absolute simplicity itself. Therefore, what do we have? We have then one and only one absolute simplicity. Because a second absolute simplicity is a fake. A second absolute simplicity is an absolute simplicity that has something besides absolute simplicity in it in order to differentiate it from the first absolute simplicity, which is a contradiction. In short, then, our second absolute simplicity will always be intrinsically contradiction. It'll always be less simple than the first absolute simplicity, which means that you can have only one and only one absolute simplicity, which is unrestricted. And for that reason, St. Thomas Aquinas calls this unconditioned reality God. We'll work on the rest of these things in the upcoming episode.